The shimmer of hyperspace collapsed into a spray of starlight, and the UNS Seraphina settled into the silent void. Below them swirled Xylos, a world that, according to the old charts and breathless legends, should have been a beacon of crystalline light, a planet that hummed with a unique, life-giving energy. Instead, Xylos was dim. On the bridge of the Seraphina, Captain Marcus Thorne stared at the main view screen, his lips a thin line. The planet was a beautiful sphere of blues and purples, its continents traced with what looked like veins of amethyst, but the vibrant glow, the signature resonance of the Cathar civilization that was said to be visible even from orbit, was almost entirely absent. Here and there, faint pinpricks of light marked what must be cities, but they were like dying embers rather than the brilliant constellations described in the ship's historical logs. "Magnify Sector Gamma 7 City Cluster," Thorne ordered, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. "Full spectrum analysis." The image zoomed, showing sprawling, elegant structures that seemed to grow out of the land itself, their forms, both alien and breathtakingly organic, but they were coated in a kind of visual static, a muteness that felt profoundly wrong. Dr. Elara Vance, the mission's lead xenoethnobotanist, stood beside the captain, her gaze fixed on the screen. She wasn't looking at the structures so much as trying to feel them, a habit that often made the more data-driven crew members raise an eyebrow. But Thorne had learned to trust Elara's uncanny intuition. Right now she felt a hollowness radiating. From the planet, a palpable sense of a song cut short. It settled in her chest like a stone. "The dulling," she murmured almost to herself. "It's worse than the reports indicated." Thorne nodded, his dark eyes troubled. "Preliminary scans show planetary energy levels at less than 15% of baseline records. Whatever this is, it's choking them." He turned to his bridge crew. "Standard approach. Hail them on all recognized Cathar frequencies. Message will be per protocol Indigo. Peaceful intent, offer of observation and potential aid, non-interference unless explicitly invited. And be patient. They've had bad experiences," a communications officer confirmed. "Hailing, Captain. No." Immediate response. Thorne had anticipated this. The Cathar, once a vibrant and outgoing species in the galactic community, had withdrawn significantly over the last few centuries, wary after disastrous interventions from other, less considerate races. Hours passed. The Seraphina held its patient vigil. Elara spent the time reviewing every scrap of information they had on Cathar biology, their unique crystalline physiology, their deep connection to the planet's resonant frequencies. It was said their very consciousness was intertwined with these energies, their thoughts and emotions shared through a complex, harmonious field. To have that field dampened, it would be like slowly going deaf, blind, and numb all at once. Finally, a signal came through, weak, laced with static, but undeniably Cathar. It was a simple acknowledgement, followed by coordinates for a designated landing zone and a time. No welcome, no questions, just a stark instruction. "Formal, but it's a start," Thorne said, allowing a fraction of the tension on the bridge to ease. He looked at Elara. "You, me, and a small security and technical team. We go in light. No visible weaponry beyond sidearms for the security detail, and we listen more than we talk." Elara nodded, a flicker of anticipation cutting through her concern. This was why she was here, to understand, to see if there was a way to help a species that seemed to be slowly fading from the universe. The lander descended through Xylos's thin atmosphere, settling gently in a designated clearing some distance from the nearest luminous citadel. The city, even up close, was subdued. Its usually iridescent crystal towers were matte, their intricate facets blurred. The air itself felt heavy, lacking the vibrant thrum that Cathar environments were supposed to possess. Waiting for them were 3 Cathar. They were tall, slender beings, their bodies composed of interlocking crystals that, even dulled, hinted at a former glory. The central figure, taller than the others, radiated an immense age and weariness. Their light was the dimmest, their crystalline structure almost opaque in places. This had to be Xylos Core, an elder lore master, according to the brief communication. "Captain," Marcus Thorne, Dr. Elara Vance of the United Nations Starcutter Seraphina, Thorne said, his voice respectful, his hands open and visible. We thank you for allowing us to land. Xylos Core's voice, when it came, was like the grinding of ancient stones, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in their chests. Your ship is unexpected. Others have come before. Their promises were as bright as their technologies. The results were not. We are aware of past difficulties, Elder Xylos Core, Elara said softly, stepping slightly forward. Her voice was calm, her gaze direct but gentle. Our purpose is different. We are here to learn, to observe, with your permission, to understand what is happening to your world, and to you. Xylos Core's multifaceted eyes, which should have gleamed with inner light, remained dim. They studied Elara for a long moment. Beside the elder, a younger Cathar, Rillian, shifted restlessly. Rillian's crystals were also muted, their posture slumped, radiating an apathy that was almost painful to witness. They didn't meet the human's eyes. Understanding? Xylos Core thrummed. A rare commodity. Very well, you may observe for a time from a distance the dulling. It takes much from us. We have little energy for distractions. The elder gestured vaguely towards the dim city. Do not interfere. Do not expect much. With that, Xylos Core and their attendants turned and began to move slowly back towards the city, their forms blending into the muted landscape. Thorne let out a slow breath. Well, that's about as warm a welcome as I expected. Elara was quiet, her gaze sweeping over the landscape towards the distant shadowed structures of the luminous citadel. Her instruments were already taking baseline readings, but her attention was caught by something else. While the main spires of the city were uniformly dim, some of the older, more peripheral structures, half hidden by time and overgrowth at the very edges of the settlement, seemed different. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but she thought she could detect a slightly more resilient luminescence there, a faint whisper of the planet's lost song. Captain, she said, her voice thoughtful. The dulling. I don't think. It's entirely uniform. Thorne looked at her, then in the direction of her gaze. What are you seeing, Doctor? I'm not sure yet, Elara replied, a new spark of inquiry in her eyes. But it might be a place to start. A tiny thread of a question, a potential clue in a world overwhelmed by silence. Within 2 Xylos days, the human team had established a modest research outpost. It wasn't a fortress of imposing technology, but a series of interconnected low-impact biodomes and sensor arrays, nestled discreetly a respectful distance from the luminous citadel. Captain Thorne had been firm. Their footprint would be minimal, their presence unobtrusive. Every piece of equipment hummed quietly, a stark contrast to the silence emanating from the Cathar city. Elara Vance and Captain Thorne were invited, or perhaps more accurately summoned, to meet Xylos Core within one of the city's outer chambers. The interior was vast, the crystalline architecture arching overhead like the inside of a colossal geode. But the light was weak, the air heavy. Maintenance seemed minimal. Fine, glittery dust coated many surfaces. Xylos Core was seated on a low, crystal dais, their form still and dim. Rillian stood nearby, a silent, shadowed sentinel. You wish to understand, Xylos Core thrummed, the sound resonating faintly in the large space. Then you must understand our caution. It is hard-earned. We respect that, Elder, Thorne replied, his tone even. Any information you're willing to share would help us avoid the mistakes of the past. A flicker, almost imperceptible, passed through Xylos Core's dim crystals. The Vordaxians, the elder began, the name itself seeming to leave a bitter taste. They came with promises of restoration. They saw the dulling as a power failure. Elara leaned forward slightly, her expression one of gentle attentiveness. Their records suggest they attempted direct energy infusions. They did, Xylos Core confirmed. They brought great machines, resonating with fierce artificial power. They sought to recharge us, as one might recharge a depleted energy cell. The elder's form seemed to shrink, the memory clearly painful. For some, the energy was too harsh. Their crystalline structures fractured. For others, it created a false, jarring brightness, followed by an even deeper dulling. Our own internal harmonies, the very essence of our being, were violated. Rillian shifted, their gaze dropping to the dusty floor, a silent testament to the generational trauma. They also offered augmentations, Xylos core continued. Cybernetic resonators, they called them. Devices to be integrated into our forms, to amplify what little resonance remained. That sounds incredibly invasive for a species whose biology is so intrinsically tied to natural resonance, Elara observed, her voice carefully neutral but laced with understanding. It was, Xylos core affirmed. A few, desperate for any relief, accepted. The devices fought against our natural state. Some Cathar simply shattered. Others rejected the implants with such violence that their systems collapsed. The Verdaxians did not understand. They saw only a failure of their technology, not a fundamental misunderstanding of our nature. Elara nodded slowly. They treated a biological and ecological crisis as an engineering problem. Precisely, Dr. Vance, Xylos core thrummed, a hint of something that might have been surprise in their tone. They could not see the interconnectedness, they could not hear the silence of the planet for the roar of their own machines. Thorne spoke. Our approach is different, Elder. Dr. Vance is a xeno-ethnobotanist. Her primary interest is in the living, systems of Xylos, the flora, the subtle energies and how they interact with your people. We will not attach machines to your people, Elara added quietly. We won't try to force a solution. Our hope is to understand the root of the dulling, which we suspect may lie in the environment itself and perhaps, with your guidance, find a way to help Xylos heal. If the planet heals, perhaps the Cathar will too. Xylos core was silent for a long moment, their multifaceted eyes studying Elara. Rillian too lifted their gaze, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps curiosity, perhaps just a break in their apathy, in their dulled eyes as they focused on the human doctor. Novel approach, Xylos core finally said. The planet, yes, it has been silent for too long. Later, outside the city, Elara examined a piece of discarded Vordaxian technology she'd found near a refuse site. A discarded resonator, sleek and metallic, but cold and inert. It was powerful, undoubtedly a marvel of engineering for some species, but completely alien to the delicate, organic, crystalline nature of the Cathar. It was like trying to mend a broken songbird with a blacksmith's hammer. It's clear why they failed, she said to Thorne, who was observing her work. They saw the symptoms, not the cause, and their solutions were entirely out of sync with Cathar biology and, I suspect, Cathar philosophy. Thorne nodded. Which is why our mission parameters are so strict. Observation, data collection, and absolutely no intervention without explicit Cathar consent and participation. We're here to offer a hand, not a dictate. He looked towards the dim city. Their trust is a fragile thing, Elara. We need to earn it one step at a time. Elara agreed. Her current hypothesis was solidifying. The dulling wasn't just a Cathar problem. It was a Xylos problem. The Cathar were the most visible symptom of an ecosystem in distress. That faint, resilient luminescence she'd seen in the ancient peripheral structures. That was the thread she needed to follow. The next day, as Elara was calibrating her bioacoustic sensors at the edge of the outpost, Xylos core approached, moving with their slow, deliberate gait. Rillian was not with them this time. Dr. Vance, the elder thrummed. Elara straightened, offering a respectful nod. Elder Xylos core, your words. About the planet healing. Xylos core paused. There are places, the murmuring crystal groves. They were once alive with resonance, the heart of our connection to Xylos. Now they are largely silent. Another pause, as if the words themselves were heavy. If you wish to truly understand, perhaps you should listen to their silence. Elara felt a surge of anticipation. Are you granting us permission to enter the groves, Elder? The outer sectors, Xylos core clarified. They are less sacred and perhaps less dangerous in their current state. Rillian will guide you. They know the paths even if they have forgotten the songs. Elara's heart lifted. It was a small opening, but it was more than she had hoped for so soon. Thank you, Elder. We will be most respectful. Xylos core simply nodded, their dim light unwavering, then turned and slowly retreated towards the city. The offer felt like a test, a fragile tendril of trust extended across a vast gulf of past hurt. Elara knew they couldn't afford to break it. The murmuring crystal groves were a ghost of their former selves. What should have been a symphony of light and resonant sound was now a hushed landscape of dulled, silent crystal formations. Ancient, tree-like structures of crystal reached towards the sky, their facets like unpolished gems absorbing more light than they reflected. The very air felt subdued. Dr. Elara Vance moved through this melancholic beauty with a quiet reverence. She was accompanied by a compact human support team of 2, a geologist specializing in crystalline structures and a biosensor technician, and their Cathar guide, Rillian. Rillian, true to Xylos core's word, knew the twisting paths through the grove, though they walked them with a profound listlessness. Their own light remained dim, their tall forms slumped as if the weight of the grove's silence pressed directly upon them. Initially, Rillian kept a deliberate distance, observing Elara's team with a mixture of suspicion and apathy. Elara's methods were unlike anything the Cathar had witnessed from off-worlders. She didn't blast rocks or bore holes. Her team deployed small, almost invisible sensors that listened more than they probed. Elara herself spent hours simply observing, sketching the intricate patterns of the crystalline flora in her datapad, or sitting quietly with a highly sensitive bioacoustic receptor pressed gently against a crystal trunk. Her eyes closed in. Concentration. What is she doing? Rillian finally thrummed one afternoon, their voice raspy from disuse. They were watching Elara, who was meticulously brushing away centuries of dust from the base of a massive gnarled crystal tree. The geologist, Dr. Jian Li, looked up from his own sample analysis. Dr. Vance believes these ancient formations might hold clues. She's listening for echoes of what used to be. Rillian made a sound that might have been a Cathar equivalent of a scoff. There is nothing to hear but silence. Elara, overhearing, turned. Not complete silence, Rillian, she said gently. Just very, very quiet. Sometimes the quietest things have the most to say. She gestured to the crystal tree. Your people built these groves, or perhaps co-evolved with them, to resonate. Even with the dulling, some of that inherent structure, that capacity for song must remain, especially in the oldest ones. She showed Rillian a display on her datapad, a complex waveform. This is the resonant signature of a younger crystal formation near the city. See how erratic and weak it is? Then, she switched the display. And this is from the core of this old one. It's faint, incredibly so, but look at the stability, the underlying complexity. It's like a whisper instead of a shout, but the tune is still there. Rillian stared at the waveforms, their multifaceted eyes narrowing slightly. It was the first time Elara had seen more than apathy in their gaze. Days turned into weeks. Elara's initial hypothesis, that a specific trace nutrient might have been depleted from the soil, affecting the newer crystal growth, proved to be a dead end. Extensive analysis showed no significant deficiencies. It was a minor setback. But Elara took it in stride. Science is about asking questions, not always getting the answers we expect on the first try, she explained to her team and to Rillian, who had started to linger closer during their discussions. This just means the problem is more complex, perhaps not purely chemical. She began to focus more on the energetic interplay between the different types of crystalline flora and on the Cathar's historical relationship with them. She asked Rillian about the feel of different crystals, what sensations they evoked even now. This one, Rillian said one day, touching a slender, pale blue crystal spire. It feels tight, stifled, like it wants to vibrate but cannot. Elara made a note. And this one? she asked, indicating a broader, amber-colored cluster. Rillian hesitated. Warmer, but tired. So very tired. These were not quantifiable data points a Vordaxian would have understood, but to Elara they were invaluable. Rillian's innate cathar senses, though blunted by the dulling, still perceived nuances her instruments might miss. She began to see Rillian not just as a guide but as a collaborator, a living link to the grove's fading energies. Slowly, tentatively, Rillian began to respond, their contributions growing from reluctant monosyllables to more thoughtful observations. The human doctor's genuine respect for their perspective was a novel experience. One afternoon, while Elara was conducting a deep resonance scan at the base of the most ancient crystal tree in the sector, a colossal gnarled specimen that local Cathar lore called the First Singer, her instrument suddenly registered an anomaly. "Gian, Mark, look at this," she called, her voice hushed with excitement. The geologist and technician hurried over, peering at her primary monitor. Deep beneath the surface, far below the usual resonance layers they had been charting, a rhythmic pulse appeared, faint, incredibly slow, but undeniably regular. It was like a colossal, sleeping heartbeat. "What is that?" Mark, the technician, breathed. "It's not matching any known geological or biological signature for this planet. And its frequency. It's completely out of sync with the surface dulling." Elara murmured, her mind racing. "It's deeper, older, purer." She looked at Rillian, who had approached, drawn by the focused intensity of the humans. "Rillian, have your people ever detected anything like this? A deep pulse from the First Singer?" Rillian stared at the pulsing waveform on the screen, their dim light flickering almost imperceptibly. They tilted their head as if listening to something far away. "The deep songs," they thrummed, the words hesitant, as if dredged from a forgotten dream. "Legends speak of them, but they were thought to be silent forever." Elara's gaze was fixed on the screen, on that faint, persistent beat. It was more than an echo. It was a sign, a deeply buried rhythmic pulse beating out of time with the silence that gripped Xylos. Here, hidden within the dying grove, was a mystery that felt like the first true note of hope. The discovery of the deep pulse galvanized Elara and her team. It was a tangible anomaly in a world succumbing to uniformity, a breadcrumb leading away from the pervasive dulling. "We need to trace its origin," Elara declared, her usual calm, tinged with an explorer's eagerness. "Rillian, these deep songs, do the legends say where they might be strongest?" Rillian, who had become visibly more engaged since witnessing the pulse on Elara's instruments, tilted their head. Their own dim light seemed to focus, as if trying to penetrate layers of forgotten history. "The First Singer is ancient, but there are whispers of a place even older, deeper, a place where the first crystals bloomed. Xylos core called it long-shadowed." That was enough for Elara. Following the direction indicated by the faint pulse, and with Rillian now taking a more active role in guiding them through the grove's increasingly dense and unstable sections, the small expedition pressed onward. Captain Thorne, kept constantly updated via comlink back on the Seraphina, authorized the use of a small, agile aerial drone. It flew discreetly ahead, its sensors mapping the treacherous terrain, relaying data on unstable crystal formations and potential pitfalls back to Elara's datapad. It was a quiet, supportive presence, human technology working in concert with their boots-on-the-ground exploration, not supplanting it. The going was tough. Paths that might once have been clear were now choked with dull, lifeless crystal overgrowth, or blocked by fallen spires that groaned under their own weight. Elara, though not a rugged field operative by training, moved with a determined grit, her scientific curiosity overriding any physical discomfort. She carefully navigated narrow ledges and clambered over slick crystal debris, her focus unwavering. Rillian, witnessing her perseverance, found a grudging respect growing. This human was not like the Vordaxians, who had sought to bulldoze their way through any obstacle. Elara treated the broken grove with a tender care, even as she pushed its boundaries. "Careful here," Rillian would thrum, their voice gaining a little more strength each day. This formation is hollow. It will not hold weight. Their innate understanding of the crystal structures, though blunted, was proving invaluable, guiding the team away from unseen dangers. Elara, in turn, always listened intently to Rillian's warnings, valuing their Cathar intuition as much as her own scientific data. After 2 more days of careful progress, the drone identified a massive cliff face, half hidden behind a curtain of petrified vine-like crystals. The deep pulse seemed strongest here, emanating from somewhere within or beyond the rock. As they approached, Elara noticed something. "Rillian, look." She pointed to a section of the cliff, mostly obscured by the crystalline vines. "Are those markings?" With Rillian's help, they carefully pulled back the brittle, lifeless strands. Beneath, etched into the dark crystal of the cliff itself, was an expansive mural. It was ancient, incredibly detailed, and unlike any Cathar art Elara had seen before. It depicted tall Cathar figures, their forms blazing with an inner light far more brilliant than any modern Cathar possessed. They were gathered around, reaching towards and seemingly interacting with a unique, flower-like crystal formation. These flowers were depicted as radiating an intense, pure luminescence, their petals like focused beams of light. "By the stars," Elara breathed, stepping closer. "I've never seen this formation in any database. Rillian, do you recognize this?" Rillian stared at the mural, their tall frame utterly still. A faint tremor ran through their crystalline body. "The Prima Lux," they whispered, the name a soft chime, like a long-lost chord finally struck. "The first light. It is from the oldest songs, the ones before the silence." Their hand reached out, tracing the outline of a glowing Cathar figure in the etching. Then the radiant bloom it revered. A flicker of genuine light, the first Elara had seen, sparked deep within Rillian's own chest and faded just as quickly, leaving a profound sense of longing in its wake. "Prima Lux," Elara repeated, committing the name and the image to memory. This wasn't just decorative, was it? This depiction, it feels like a ritual, a symbiosis. The Cathar in the mural were not just admiring the crystal flowers. They were attuned to them, drawing strength and light and perhaps giving something in return. Captain Thorne's voice came over the comms, calm and steady. "Elara, we're seeing those images via your shoulder cam. Remarkable. Any indication of what this Prima Lux is or was?" "It appears to be a keystone botanical crystal, Captain," Elara replied, her mind already piecing together a new hypothesis. One that was central to Cathar brilliance and, I suspect, to the overall health of Xylos's resonant ecosystem. And it seems to be missing from the present day. That evening, back at the research outpost, Elara presented her findings, including high-resolution images of the mural, to Xylos core via holographic display. The ancient Cathar elder stared at the glowing depictions of the Prima Lux and the radiant Cathar of old, their usually stoic form visibly disturbed. "The Prima Lux." Xylos core thrummed, their voice lower and more gravelly than usual. A deep agitation resonated from them, a sorrow mixed with something akin to fear. "These are from the time of light, before the great dimming. Do you know where we might find them, Elder?" Elara asked gently. "Or what happened to them?" Xylos core's dim light pulsed erratically. "Forbidden legends, fractured tales. They speak of a place where the Prima Lux once bloomed in abundance, a sanctuary of pure resonance." The elder's gaze became distant, focused on a painful, shadowed memory. "They call it the sunken geode vaults, a place of immense power and profound sorrow. It was said to be lost, sealed away after the catastrophe that first wounded our world. The sunken geode vaults. The name itself sent a shiver down Elara's spine. A place of power and sorrow, linked to a planetary catastrophe and the disappearance of this vital crystal flower. The path ahead was becoming clearer, yet more daunting. The search for the Prima Lux had just begun, and it seemed to lead directly into the heart of Xylos's forgotten trauma. Xylos Core's fragmented directions were more like riddles woven from sorrow and half-forgotten lore. They spoke of a ravine where the sky is a sliver, and a path hidden behind a crystal waterfall that no longer flows. But combined with Elara Vance's careful geological surveys, which cross-reference the Elder's clues with seismic data and the lingering direction of the deep pulse, a potential location for the sunken geode vaults began to emerge. It was in a remote, deeply fractured region of the murmuring crystal groves, an area even the Cathar had avoided for centuries. Captain Thorne organized a specialized expedition team. Elara, a more energized Rylian, 2 human geotechs equipped with stabilization and excavation tools, and a medic. Xylos Core, despite their frailty, insisted on accompanying them to the edge of the fractured region. The ancient elder felt a pull, a need to bear witness, even if only from a distance. The journey was arduous. The landscape grew increasingly wild and unstable. They navigated around colossal crystal shards that jutted from the ground like broken teeth and rappelled across a deep, dry chasm where a river of resonant energy might once have flowed. At one point, a low rumble sent a cascade of smaller crystals tumbling down a nearby slope, a crystal slide that forced them into a hasty detour, reminding them constantly of the planet's lingering instability. Rylian, now more alert and attuned to their surroundings than Elara had ever seen them, proved indispensable, sensing tremors and weak points in the crystal structures before the human instruments could fully register them. Finally, guided by Rylian's growing certainty and Elara's precise analysis of the deep pulse, they found it, a narrow fissure hidden behind a curtain of dull, petrified crystal formations that did indeed resemble a long-dead waterfall. The air wafting from the fissure was cold and carried a profound stillness. "The sunken geode vaults," Rylian breathed, their voice a mixture of awe and trepidation. Their own crystalline form seemed to vibrate faintly in response to something emanating from within. Xylos Core, who had been monitoring their progress via a live comm feed relayed by one of the geotechs, spoke, their voice raspy with emotion. "Proceed with reverence, Dr. Vance. You tread upon the heart of our oldest memory and our deepest wound." Equipped with safety lines and portable lights, the team descended into the fissure. It opened into a vast cavern, a colossal geode whose crystalline walls were fractured and scarred. Huge sections had collapsed, forming jagged piles of debris. The scale of the destruction was breathtaking. It looked as though some immense force, an unimaginable energy surge or a violent geological upheaval had ripped through the vault centuries ago. Dust motes thick as velvet hung in the still air, disturbed for the first time in ages by their entry. This was no slow decay, one of the geotechs murmured, shining a beam across a massive, shattered crystal pillar. This was catastrophic. Elara's heart ached at the sight. This wasn't just geological damage, it was the scene of a profound ecological and cultural tragedy. Scattered amongst the debris like fallen stars were the remnants of what could only have been Prima Lux clusters, countless broken, dulled crystal petals. This was where the vibrant heart of Xylos's resonance had been shattered. Rylian walked as if in a trance, their light flickering weakly. They reached out a trembling hand to touch a shard of a broken Prima Lux, a soft, mournful thrum escaping them. It was a sound of pure loss, a grief that transcended words. In that moment, Elara felt an overwhelming wave of empathy for the Cathar, for the generations who had lived under the shadow of this forgotten devastation, their vitality slowly ebbing away without knowing why. But then, Elara's attention was drawn to a section of the cavern wall that was surprisingly intact, shielded by a massive overhang of rock. The deep pulse they had been tracking was strongest here. "Over there," she urged. Carefully, they picked their way through the debris. Behind the overhang, nestled in a small protected alcove as if cradled by the planet itself, was a sight that made them all stop in their tracks. A handful of Prima Lux. There were perhaps 5 or 6 of them, small, delicate flower-like crystal formations, anchored to the rock. Their light was incredibly faint, like the last embers of a dying fire. Yet it was undeniably pure, a clear, gentle luminescence in the oppressive gloom. Each one pulsed with that slow, steady rhythm they had tracked, a tiny, defiant heartbeat in the tomb of their species. Rillian sank to their knees, their multifaceted eyes wide, reflecting the fragile light of the surviving blooms. A single bright tear of crystalline fluid traced a path down their cheek, a cathar expression of profound emotion rarely seen. Their own light flickered, not with despair this time, but with an almost painful surge of dawning fragile hope. Elara knelt beside them, her scientific objectivity momentarily overwhelmed by the sheer poignancy of the discovery. These weren't just botanical specimens. They were the last vestiges of a lost world, the key to Xylos' potential rebirth. They survived, she whispered. Somehow, they survived. The dulling, she realized with chilling clarity, wasn't a disease or a curse. It was a planetary scar, the lingering echo of this ancient catastrophe. The cathar had lost their most vital symbiotic partner, the source of the pure resonance that fueled their light and their society. They had been slowly starving for centuries, unaware of the feast that had been destroyed. The surviving Primalux were incredibly delicate. Their light, though pure, was weak. Elara knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that simply collecting samples and trying to replicate them with human technology would not be enough. These were not just plants, they were resonant beings, intrinsically linked to the cathar and the unique energies of Xylos. Their resonant frequency is barely stable, she said softly, her mind already racing. Our science can help analyze their needs, their structure, but to nurture them back to strength, to help them sing again, I think we're going to need more than our laboratories. We're going to need the cathar's ancient wisdom, the very connection that was severed here. The path forward was clear, but it was also deeply challenging. They had found the heart of the problem, and with it, a fragile seed of hope. Now, they had to learn how to make it bloom. The discovery in the sunken geode vault sent a ripple of fragile hope through the human team and the few cathar who were privy to it. Transporting the surviving Primalux specimens was an operation of extreme delicacy. Half were carefully moved to a specially prepared, atmospherically controlled biodome aboard the UNS Seraphina, where Elara Vance could use her most advanced analytical tools. The other half, at Elara's insistence and with Xylos Corps' solemn agreement, were brought to a secluded, sheltered sanctuary on Xylos, near the Lumina Citadel, a place the cathar themselves prepared, clearing away dulled crystal growth. To make space, Elara knew that the cathar needed to be central to any attempt at revival. These aren't just botanical samples, Captain, she explained to Thorn. Their resonance is tied to this world, to the cathar themselves. We can support, analyze, provide ideal conditions, but the spark, that has to come from them. Thorn understood. He ensured Elara had every resource she needed, both on the ship and for the planetary sanctuary, and maintained a protective buffer against any undue pressure for quick results from distant UN authorities. This was delicate work, a blending of science and something far older. In the quiet sanctuary on Xylos, Elara worked side by side with Xylos Corps and a now deeply invested Rillian. The younger cathar, transformed by the discovery in the vault, had shed much of their apathy. A fervent desire to heal their world now shone from their faintly rekindling light. Initial attempts to nurture the Primalux seedlings, tiny, offshoots carefully taken from the ancient specimens, using optimized nutrient solutions and light spectrums devised by human science, yielded only minimal results. The seedlings remained alive, but their light was stubbornly faint, their resonant hum almost non-existent. They are missing something essential, Elara mused, frustration warring with her innate patience. Something our instruments can't provide. Xylos Corps, who had been spending long periods in deep meditation near the seedlings, finally spoke, their voice a low thrum that seemed to vibrate with ancient echoes. The old songs. They speak of resonant nurturing, not just providing sustenance, but attuning, singing the crystal to wakefulness. The elder's multifaceted eyes focused on Rillian. The Cathar of old did not merely observe beauty. They participated in its creation. Fragments of these forgotten techniques began to surface in Xylos Core's memory, like shards of a shattered geode slowly reassembling. It involved projecting focused bioacoustic frequencies, specific patterns of humming and resonant thought, to stimulate the crystal's growth and luminescence. It was less a precise science and more an intuitive art, a deep communion. Elara listened with profound respect, her scientific mind making connections. Bioacoustic stimulation can indeed affect crystalline growth patterns. Your ancestors understood this intrinsically. She encouraged them, setting up sensitive monitors that could provide visual feedback on the resonant frequencies being produced, allowing a bridge between Cathar intuition and observable data. The first attempts were tentative. Xylos Core's own resonance was weak with age and the dulling, but their knowledge was the key. They guided Rillian, whose younger system, though still muted, possessed more inherent energy. Rillian was hesitant, filled with self-doubt. I have not truly sung since before the dulling took my full strength, they confessed, their light dimming slightly. What if I damage them further? Your intent is pure, Rillian, Elara said softly, placing a reassuring hand near their arm. A gesture she wasn't sure Cathar customs allowed, but it felt right. These Primalux have waited centuries in silence. I believe they are waiting to hear a Cathar voice again. Just try. We'll observe. With Xylos Core humming a barely audible guiding tone, Rillian focused on a single, struggling Primalux seedling. They closed their eyes and slowly, hesitantly, began to thrum, a low, wavering note that gradually gained strength and clarity. It wasn't a song of words, but of pure resonant feeling, a plea, an offering, a call to awaken. Minutes passed. Then on Elara's monitor, a tiny flicker. The seedling's internal luminescence, previously a flat line, pulsed faintly. Its resonant output, almost nil before, registered a tiny spike. Rillian's eyes snapped open, their own light flaring brighter for a moment. Did you see? We did, Elara breathed, a wide smile spreading across her face. Keep going, Rillian. It's working. Over the following days, Rillian practiced, Xylos Core guiding them, Elara providing scientific feedback and encouragement. It was an extraordinary collaboration. Rillian's confidence grew with each successful session. The more they sang to the Primalux, the stronger their own internal resonance became. The dulling that had clung to them like a shroud began to recede, their crystalline form slowly regaining a measure of its lost luster. They were not just healing the plants. They were healing themselves. Xylos Core, witnessing this, also seemed to draw strength. The act of passing on this sacred, nearly lost knowledge filled the elder with a renewed sense of purpose, and their own light, too, seemed to burn a little clearer, a little warmer. The true breakthrough came a week later. One of the seedlings Rillian had been focusing on, nurtured by both Cathar song and carefully managed human environmental controls, began to unfurl new crystal petals. These petals were not dim and lifeless, but glowed with a clear, vibrant light, far brighter than its parent specimen. And then it happened. The small Primalux bloomed fully. It emitted not just light, but a distinct, harmonious chime, a single, pure note that resonated through the sanctuary. It was a sound so clear, so beautiful, that even the human team members felt it, a subtle vibration in their bones, a lifting of the spirit. Cathar assistants who had been quietly working nearby stopped, their heads turning, their own dulled, forms seeming to lean towards the source of the sound. They stared at the glowing Primalux and then at Rillian, whose own light was now a soft, steady glow. A murmur went through them, a sound of awe and dawning wonder. For the first time in generations, they were hearing a true note of Xylos's ancient song, the chime of the first successfully cultivated Primalux, was like a stone dropped into a still, silent pond. The ripples spread quickly. News of the bloom, and of Rillian's part in it, resonated through the luminous citadels with a speed that belied the Cathar's usual slow, deliberate pace. The dulling had not just muted their light, it had frayed their intricate societal connections, the shared resonant field through which they experienced collective consciousness. The song of the Prima Lux was a call back to that unity. More Cathar, particularly the younger generations who had known only the encroaching silence, were drawn to the sanctuary, inspired by Rillian, whose own light now glowed with a steady, confident luminescence, their movements imbued with a newfound grace. They came to learn the ancient techniques of resonant nurturing. Xylos core, their own crystalline form noticeably, brighter and their movements more fluid than when the humans first arrived, became a patient and wise mentor, guiding them through the rediscovered harmonies. Elara Vance and her team transitioned from primary researchers to facilitators. They shared their knowledge of optimal growing conditions, nutrient balances, and advanced propagation techniques for the delicate crystal seedlings. But the core of the revival, the resonant attunement, was now firmly in Cathar hands. Small, sheltered gardens of Prima Lux began to appear around the luminous citadels, tended with a reverence that was deeply moving to witness. As these gardens bloomed, their collective light and harmonious chimes began to weave a tapestry of gentle energy. The oppressive weight of the dulling started to lift, not dramatically, but with the slow, steady persistence of a dawn breaking after a long night. Cathar, who spent time near the Prima Lux, participating in their care or simply basking in their pure resonance, found their own inner light strengthening. Colors not seen for generations began to reappear in their crystalline forms, soft blues, warm ambers, gentle lavenders. More importantly, their energy returned. The pervasive apathy that had gripped their society began to loosen its hold, replaced by a quiet but determined sense of purpose. The shared act of nurturing the Prima Lux was reforging their societal bonds, their collective song slowly, beautifully, returning. The time came for the UNS Seraphina to prepare for departure. Their mission, as Elara saw it, was not to be permanent caretakers but catalysts. They have the tools, the knowledge, and most importantly, the will, Elara said to Captain Thorne as they stood observing a newly established Prima Lux garden near the main citadel. Cathar were moving among the glowing crystal flowers, their forms more vibrant, their low hum of communication subtly richer. This is their song to sing now. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, not the pride of a conqueror, but the quiet joy of a gardener who sees their seeds take root and flourish in another's care. Rillian had become a leading figure in the restoration movement. Their artistic talents, once stifled by the dulling, now found full expression in the design of the new crystal gardens, weaving the Prima Lux into aesthetically and harmonically pleasing arrangements that amplified their collective resonance. They were a symbol of their generation's rebirth, their light a beacon for others. Before the Seraphina left Xylos core, their light almost fully restored to a soft, wise glow, formally addressed Captain Thorne and Elara Vance. "You came to Xylos when we were fading into silence," the elder thrummed, their voice now clear and carrying a gentle strength. "Others before you sought to impose their will, their noise. You chose to listen. You helped us find a forgotten note within ourselves, and because of that, Xylos will sing again. Our deepest gratitude cannot be fully expressed in your language or even our own." Captain Thorne nodded, his expression one of sincere respect. "The achievement is yours, Elder Xylos core, and that of all Cathar. You possessed the strength and wisdom to reclaim your heritage. We were merely privileged to witness and assist. We will maintain open channels should you ever need further consultation, but this victory belongs to Xylos." As a farewell gift, the Cathar presented the Seraphina with a perfectly attuned Prima Lux seedling, its small form glowing with a healthy, vibrant light, nestled in a crystal container that Rillian themselves had shaped. "So that a piece of Xylos's renewed song may travel with you among the stars," Rillian said, their voice full of a warmth that would have been unimaginable just months before. The UNS Seraphina lifted silently from Xylos, leaving behind a world that was subtly but undeniably brighter. On the bridge, Elara and Captain Thorne stood before the containment field, holding the precious Primalux seedling. It pulsed with a soft, steady light, a tiny beacon of hope. As the ship prepared for its jump to hyperspace, the main view screen showed Xylos receding. From this distance, the individual lights of the luminous citadels were becoming more distinct, like newborn stars awakening in the planetary twilight. Elara activated the ship's long-range bioacoustic sensors, focusing them on the planet. A faint sound trickled through the speakers, amplified many times over, a complex interwoven series of harmonious chimes and resonant hums. It was the collective song of the Primalux Gardens and the Cathar themselves, no longer a whisper but a growing chorus. "They're singing their world back to life," Elara murmured, a gentle smile on her face. Captain Thorne nodded, a sense of profound satisfaction settling over him. Humanity hadn't conquered or dictated. They had listened, understood, and empowered, and in doing so, they had helped a species find its own voice again, a chorus of renewal that would now resonate across the silent reaches of space. The Seraphina turned, and with a flash, leaped into the star-streaked river of hyperspace, carrying with it the light of a distant, healing world.